Today we're talking about Mars square Saturn. If you feel like you're waiting for life to punch you in the face, you might have this aspect in your natal chart. If every time you want to go, you have to stop, you might have Mars square Saturn. Today we're talking about Mars square Saturn in the natal chart, what that means for your discipline and your sense of responsibility, your motivation and your action in life. I'm Cassandra and I help you make the most out of your chart. In this video, we're going to deep dive into the energies of Mars square Saturn. So to get value out of this video, you need to know, do you have Mars square Saturn in your natal chart? If you're not sure, you can watch this video where I teach you how to find out. This video also is going to apply if you have Mars conjunct Saturn or if you have Mars opposite Saturn. Just know the nature of the interaction between these planets is going to be different. With the conjunction, it's like they're fused together. With the opposition, it's like they're opponents. So that being said, today we're talking about what it means if you have Mars square Saturn in your chart. And as we dive into this, always keep in mind that you are not your chart, you are what you do with your chart. In this video, we're going over what Mars square Saturn means, what it means astrologically, how to tell more about what kind of square it is, what it means for your personality. I'm going to give a famous example and I'm going to help you figure out how to work with this. Okay, so let's talk about Mars and then talk about Saturn, and then we'll talk about how these two interact when they get together. Mars and Saturn are both malefics. Malefic means bad. On this channel, we acknowledge that bad things exist. We do not sugarcoat and pretend malefic planets are good. We also do not try to scare the hell out of you. We are somewhere in the middle. So Mars and Saturn, they're both bad guys. And there's a way to actually figure out which one's worse for you if you know what sect is and if you know if you have a day or a night chart. But when you have Mars and Saturn interacting in your chart, that means the bad guys are on the same team. They're getting together and they're usually somehow going to be working against you in a way. Everyone has a malefic planet. Everyone has Mars somewhere in their chart. Everyone has Saturn somewhere in their chart. So we acknowledge that everyone has a unique challenge that Mars is going to speed up a bit, and a unique challenge that Saturn is going to kind of slow down, make that area of life come slower or come be hard won. Wherever you have Saturn, it is hard won. So what happens in the chart when Saturn and Mars connect is that life is hard won because Mars represents our passion and our action. And with Saturn squaring it, it means you don't get to move forward in life unless you work hard. People with Mars Saturn in their chart usually do not have things just happen easily for them. Everything they do, they got to work hard for. Now, this placement can make you a very, very capable person. We'll talk more about that later. Let's start with what Mars does to Saturn. Mars stimulates Saturn. That means Saturn's nature is to be disciplined, is to be responsible, is to deal with hard work. Saturn is the planet of consequences. So what happens when Mars speeds that up is the themes of discipline, hard work, hardship, sacrifice, and consequences will be very strong themes in the life of the person with this in their chart. It doesn't mean life has to be so hard for you and you hate every minute of it. Sometimes the person with this aspect actually enjoys these topics. Sometimes the person with Mars and Saturn connected likes being disciplined. They feel most passionate when they are doing something that requires discipline. So it doesn't always have to work against you. But Mars stimulating Saturn brings the theme of authority, discipline, strictness, consequences, being held accountable. These are all going to be strong themes. Now, oftentimes it's going to be a father figure that will create these themes in your life. Very often you have a strict dad, but not always. Either way, sometimes it's you become this way. You become more strict. If you're a parent with this aspect, you might be more strict with your kids. You might be the disciplinarian of the parents. You might teach your kids the value of discipline and hard work because you believe in it, because it is what has gotten you so far. So that is what Mars does to Saturn. Now, what does Saturn do to Mars? This is probably the more challenging part of the situation, because what Saturn does to Mars is slows it down. But Mars doesn't want to go slow. Mars wants to go fast. Mars is like a Ferrari, a hot rod. I don't know cars very well. And Saturn is like a semi-truck, where if the semi-truck is blocking the Ferrari's way and there's no other way, the Ferrari cannot get past the semi even though it wants to go fast. Okay, Saturn can also be seen as a speed bump in this situation, where if you don't follow the rules, you get consequences. So Saturn really kind of holds Mars back, and Mars is our will, our willpower, our ability to accomplish things, our motivation, our passion. So what happens when your passion is not allowed to be fully expressed? Well, sometimes we see people who have experiences in life where they are held down. They are fought with, they are beaten up. Life can beat you up kind of in a way. Life can hold you down. Life can try to thwart your will. When you try to accomplish something, someone can stop you. Literally, someone can physically stop you, or you can be kind of detained in a way from what you want. That doesn't mean you can never get what you want. It just means that people with Mars square Saturn have to have more patience than normal to get what they want. Usually what they want comes more slowly. And again, Saturn, there is a good side to Saturn we'll talk about. But Saturn is going to slow Mars down. So one way Saturn slows down Mars is through the will and the discipline. If you try to cut corners and do something really fast that normally should take longer, you're going to get punished for that. And you're not going to get into, you're not going to pass the class if you try to write your essay the night before. Or other things like this, where if you try to cut corners with Mars square Saturn, you're not getting in. So when we're connecting this to the mythology, Saturn is Father Time, and Aries is the god of war. Mars is ruled by Aries. Mars rules Aries. So it's like the god of war wants to fight and do things right now and be impulsive, right? Mars is impulsive. It's fast. It rules conflict. It rules fighting. It rules aggression. Saturn is slow. It's mature. It's cold. It takes very long time. Saturn's a mountain, So these planets do not agree on speed. And this is where Saturn probably hurts Mars more, because Mars can try to speed up Saturn. Saturn's not going any faster. Saturn is a mountain. But Saturn is capable of slowing down Mars quite a bit. So the way these two planets agree is they agree on like the worst things, because Mars is fighting and war, and Saturn is like consequences. So sometimes they agree on things like punishment. So punishment is a really strong theme in the life of someone with Mars square Saturn. Again, they might become the punisher. They might be punished a lot. They might become the punisher. Also, it's like Saturn being the stillness, Mars being the fighting. It really is the metaphor of being held down and beaten up. So I'm not trying to make you guys sad, those of you who have this aspect, but it really is like people with Mars square Saturn. It's like you're waiting for a fight. You're ready for a fight. You're ready for life to fight with you because you're so used to it. Now let's talk about the type of square you can have. There's actually a few different types of squares you could have. There's two ways to characterize this. One is by the cardinal, fixed, or mutable, and the other is what quarter of a square it is. So when in the cycle of the planets did the square happen? There's two that it could be. It can be the first quarter square or the third quarter square. So whether it's cardinal, fixed, or mutable is very simple. You can tell by what signs they are in. If this square is in cardinal signs, it's a cardinal square. The cardinal signs are Aries, Libra, Capricorn, Cancer. And you can tell each set of signs, cardinal, fixed, or mutable, you can tell because they make a cross. So there's the cardinal cross, there's a fixed cross, and then there's the mutable cross. The fixed square is going to happen in fixed signs. So that's going to be Taurus, Scorpio, Leo, Aquarius. And the mutable square is going to be in mutable signs. So that's going to be Gemini, Sagittarius, Virgo, Pisces. So it doesn't matter which of those it's in. It's either cardinal, fixed, or mutable. So if you have, Saturn in Virgo, square Mars in Pisces, square Mars in Sag, it doesn't matter if it's which one of those four, it's still a mutable square. If these planets are in a cardinal squares tend to have more of a challenge with starting things. Cardinal signs start things, but sometimes the cardinal square, you'll actually argue with yourself over how to start it and end up not starting. Other times you will start something, but then you don't know what to do with it after it's started. If these planets are in a fixed square, well, fixed squares usually are really, really good at maintaining things, but the challenge for fixed squares is knowing when to change, because fixed energy doesn't want to move. It wants to stay the same. So identifying the need for change is harder for fixed squares. And then mutable squares. For mutable squares, mutable signs are really good at changing and adapting and finishing things up, responding to other people's needs, but they struggle with consistency. So sometimes if you have a mutable square, it's harder to know when to stay the same. It's harder to know when to stand firm, because you'll have a tendency to adjust when you need to just stick with something. All right, so now we know the cardinal, fixed, or mutable. So let's talk now about the first quarter or the third quarter square. In order to understand this, we need to zoom out and think about the lunar cycle. Most of you probably know that we have the new moon. That's when the sun and the moon are together. And then, as the moon moves around, and the sun is also still moving in this situation, but as the moon moves around, when it first makes the first square to that sun, well, that's the first quarter square. When we have the full moon, that's the opposition. And then there's another square when the moon is on its way back to the new moon again. Well, every pair of planets has a cycle like this with each other that are different lengths depending on how the planets move. So Saturn and Mars has its own sort of new moon cycle with a square, an opposition, and another square. So it is said that the first quarter square has it's more of a new beginning kind of a square. It's more of you're just figuring this energy out kind of a square, because it's the first time that planet squares the other planet in that cycle. It is said that the third quarter square, it has more wisdom involved, because you've already overcome the challenge that first quarter square had. So when you have a first quarter square between Mars and Saturn, that means Mars is going to be at its first square after that new moon cycle, the conjunction between Mars and Saturn. So that means energetically for you, it's more about learning how to overcome the challenge. It's learning how to overcome the square that is sort of built into your natal chart, the natal promise of that square. Now, if you have the third quarter square in your natal chart, that means it's more about using wisdom, this innate wisdom, to still overcome that lesson, but it has less of a new energy and more of a finishing up energy attached to it. So now on to the Mars square Saturn personality. There's quite a few things that this aspect brings. Number one, you're going to have endurance. You're going to have endurance with Mars square Saturn. You are going to be able to withstand. You're going to be able to endure. And for some people, you're going to have so much endurance that if you don't put yourself through hard things, you will not feel satisfied. With Mars in connection with Saturn, there may be a need for life to be hard. We all have sort of a need for life to be hard in a way. We all need a certain amount of challenge. The Mars Saturn person is going to really need a certain amount of challenge. It's almost like if the race, it's like if you win a race and you're like, that was too easy, right? It's like Mars square Saturn is like your life is like the video game set on hard mode from the beginning. It doesn't mean every single area of your life will always be hard, but if you go from hard mode to easy mode, it's going to be too easy. It's not going to be fun enough. Now, for some people, that hard mode is going to be more depressing, and they're going to react to it with more of a, why even try? Life is so hard, why even try? Where other people, it's actually might be more energizing, and their reaction to it is going to be, life is so hard. I'm going to be able to beat it. Let me beat it. Let me be the winner. Let me be on top. Let me dominate. Either you want to dominate or you don't even want to try. Both can be worked with. The other thing Mars can do to your personality when it's squaring Saturn is your desires can be repressed or thwarted. It's almost like you're guaranteed you just don't get what you want that easily with Mars square Saturn. You have to work for it. It's withheld from you. If you want a pony, you're not getting a pony. And, a lot of these things will be stronger in childhood because you don't necessarily have as much control over the outcome. Where like maybe you love someone, and in order to love them, you have to give up something you want or need. Love being passion being Mars. There can be an energy of sacrifice there, of having to sacrifice for the things you love, or getting put in situations where you just don't have a choice. You have to learn how to go without. Now, this does not mean you can't overcome, and the celebrity example is someone who is not going without anymore. All right, so you have hardships. Saturn is the planet of hardship. It's the planet of war, poverty, homelessness. It's the planet of suffering. Saturn is a planet of suffering. So you have a planet of suffering connected to the personal planet that represents desire. So you have to suffer for the things you desire, or you desire suffering, are some of the ways this can show up. So hardships when you're young, poverty or challenge or some kind of setbacks, or just learning how to endure. Then life becomes a fight. Oftentimes for Saturn and Mars people, life is a fight. Oftentimes you have a fear of being controlled. Sometimes this is because you have been controlled. And so again, the issue of dominance comes in here, where it's like either you were controlled so rigidly that as an adult, you're like, that's not going to happen again. I'm going to be the one in control. I will dominate. Like a fear of getting dominated, or the total almost overcompensation of I'm going to dominate so hard, nothing can ever dominate me. That is how it goes. So usually either you give in or you overcompensate. And because Mars is the gas pedal and Saturn is the brake, it's like you can feel in life like you don't just get to shoo through the race. You have to stop and then go, and then stop and then go. And again, you will be sort of punished more or held to a higher standard when it comes to what you are doing. And if you are not, it's almost like if you're doing something that someone could get in trouble for, you'll be the one who gets in trouble. And that's true for anyone with a strong Saturn, is that the area of life Saturn is connected to is going to just have more consequences for you. But there is a good side that I'm finally getting to. And that is that your ability to reach your long-term goals is unmatched. Unmatched. Because you know how to be patient. You know how to endure. You know how to sacrifice. You know what to sacrifice for. You know what it's like to go without. So when you need to go without for something, which we all do sometimes, you can definitely do that. You might even feel like everyone else is just a pussy. If you feel like you're just surrounded by pussies, you might have Mars square Saturn in your chart, because people with strong Saturn energy, and for you, it's connected to the will. So you have a strong will. When you have a strong will and you're around people who don't, you're just like, why can't you withstand that? Why are you crying? Why did you have to take so many days off over something so small? It's like you can kind of feel like you're surrounded by weaklings. And that's because you have this built-in insane amount of strength in your chart. And you sort of have to learn patience early on, because you're not allowed to just go and get what you want. So when life situations happen that call for patience, dedication, and sacrifice, you're there. You're already on it. So now we're going to go to the celebrity example of Mars square Saturn, and that is the one and only Andrew Tate. Now, we don't know Andrew Tate's birth time. But he does have Saturn in Sagittarius and Mars in Pisces squaring that Saturn. We can see a lot of the themes that we talked about in this video in his life. His story when he was young about having his dad buy him a lunchbox when he got in a fight and his dad saying, I'll buy you as many of these as you want. His other story about trying to bring this aloe vera drink into his country or a different country and borrowing the money and then losing it all. And just the ability to withstand hardship, the ability to overcome poverty. And we can even see his square, it was actually activated when he went to prison and everything. That was the first quarter square of the Mars-Saturn cycle, and it was making an aspect to his planets. We can also see the desire for dominance in the fact that his business, is controlling women in a way, and how he does sort of have a more controlling attitude toward women. I'm not really in agreement with this, but we can still talk about it. We can still talk about stuff we don't agree with. But I do agree with a lot of what he says, honestly. And I think that he is a perfect example of this aspect because he teaches young men how to dominate their own lives. And this would be an example of someone who has used this aspect in the most positive way. He became a fighter. And, now he is sort of like fighting with people on the internet, sort of, like fighting for a belief. Saturn in Sagittarius, Mars in Pisces, very, very belief oriented. We also know, I know that he's very religious, which we can see some of that with Sag and Pisces in the sense that beliefs become very important, especially with Pisces, like the connection with God, the connection to all things can become very important. Now that can be in a religious way or otherwise, depending on the person. But we can see all these themes in his chart, and it's such a perfect example. Even him going to prison is an example of Saturn square Mars. Saturn being walls, right? A prison cell is a very Saturnian place to be. And Mars in Pisces squaring that Saturn, it's like, this does not mean everyone with Mars square Saturn will go to prison. Think about it though. Think about what that aspect means in more of a broad context. Well, having consequences. So anything you do that is, and I'm not saying he has guilty, but anything you do with Mars square Saturn, you will have consequences for. So even talking about how he made so much money, blah, 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 and then the Romanian government, whatever, that is all him having consequences for his actions, whether he's guilty or not. So, and even if he's not guilty, that even kind of proves the case more so, right? Because wherever you have Saturn, you will be punished more if you're not doing everything 1000% by the book. Anything someone would be punished for, you can be punished for. You almost will be punished for. And we can also see it in his personality when it comes to the need to dominate, not just through being a fighter, but through how he sort of approaches women in having a business that controls women. And even in his beliefs toward women, he kind of does sort of have a very dominating, yet charismatic personality, you could say. I could talk about him longer, but we're going to move on now. So don't think that even if you have this aspect and you don't like Andrew Tate, don't think that means you have to be like him. It does not mean you're going to prison. It does not mean you are going to be a boxer or whatever he did. It just means the similarity here is the need to withstand, the endurance, the need to fight back in life. So don't let that, turn you away. Now, how to harness this energy? Because if Andrew Tate could harness this energy, so can you. That's kind of the point of using the celebrity examples, is that if they're, this is not someone who is laying over and dying and saying, oh, life has been so hard for me, I'm just going to let it be. This is someone who has said, okay, let me fight back. And even if you don't have Mars next to a fixed star, you can still learn how to fight back against life and how to be prepared for that fight without being over-prepared for a fight or without sort of creating the fights, if that makes sense. So, number 1, to harness the energy of Mars square Saturn in your chart, you need to make sure you are challenging yourself enough, and make sure the challenges that you're giving yourself are in something productive, okay? An example of an unproductive way to challenge yourself would be playing video games. Sometimes I play video games, so I'm not saying you can't do that. But when your only source of winning is in a video game that is fake, it almost makes it okay to lose at life, and this isn't good for anyone. But for someone with Mars square Saturn, you probably need more physical challenge, and you probably do need to become a person that you feel like can dominate whatever in life previously you felt like you could not. It doesn't mean you have to become a fighter. You can, or you can become an attorney, and fight that way. There are ways to harness the energy of fighting in a way that is for the greater good. And it's up to you to alchemize that, to decide how that would look for you personally. And it's also going to depend on where you are in life, that if life is bringing you a ton of challenges right now, that might not be the right next step. The right next step might be to step up to the challenge life is already giving you, and not lay back and go, oh, I'll just give up. So 2, don't start fights in life unless you need to. It's possible someone with Mars square Saturn, because of that desire to dominate, that could get a little skewed. So you'll have to see how this shows up for you. You'll have to do some introspection and see if you're so defensive, so ready for a fight that it's causing problems, and watch for that tendency. And then the third thing is to know that you have more endurance than most people will ever have in their lives, just because that is built into your personality, that connection between discipline and action. So knowing that when life hands you difficult things, knowing that you are capable of handling them, and being able to step up and step into the ability to dominate. And one tool that I found, I don't have this aspect, but one tool that I found that helps, if you get in situations when you feel like it's too much or it's overwhelming, is to visualize yourself as being bigger than that thing. Another thing that is possible by overcoming Mars square Saturn, one is to know that Saturn gets better with time. So the older you get, literally just aging, letting time pass, this aspect is going to get, I wouldn't want to say easier, because that might be putting it too nicely, but it will get easier than it has been, right? When you are a child and someone tells you can't have ice cream, it's the end of the world, right? Right? But when you're an adult and someone's like, no, there's no ice cream, you can buy your own ice cream later if you really wanted ice cream. So being withheld these things when you're young, it just is soul crushing. But as you age, being withheld things, it doesn't have as bad of a sting, because as adults, we kind of know we're in control of certain things, whereas kids, we're just kind of subject to whatever is happening. This is one way Saturn Mars gets better with time. Another way Saturn aspects get better is by kind of doing the thing of Saturn. And doing the thing of Saturn is paying your bills on time, being responsible, anticipating problems ahead of time and being prepared for them instead of just hoping everything is easy. So this is another thing Saturn Mars can help you with, because you're naturally going to probably be more problem aware than most people. So it's about putting that problem awareness into a way that is constructive in your life rather than destructive. So destructive might look like expecting every relationship to come with a bunch of crap that it may or may not actually come with. A constructive way might be paying your taxes or saving your money, or getting the right business insurance. Things like that, where you're ready for the fight that life is going to bring you. And it's nice in the movies where there's the Rocky cut scene, where the fighter steps up and gets ready and punches the bag, and it's fun to watch. But in real life, Mars Saturn are all the days of getting up and punching that bag and getting up and doing it again and getting up and doing it again. And your version of that may not be physically fighting. It may be stepping up to something else that has to be endured. Saturn gets better with time. And because you have Saturn with Mars, that means getting your desires met in life is going to be more of a higher possibility. as you get older and as you learn patience. In your case, Mars square Saturn, patience is necessary because Saturn slows down everything it touches. One way to make this more personal is to consider your rising sign and to consider what area of life Mars rules for you based on that rising sign. So like if you are an Aries rising, Mars rules you, right? If you're a Virgo rising, Mars rules your 3rd house of siblings, and it rules your 8th house of other people's money. So those areas of life, when you have Mars square Saturn and you're a Virgo rising, those areas of life also are going to start off harder when you're younger and get better with time. So knowing what house Mars rules for you will tell you the areas of life that applies to. Another thing is to just consider people who are Mars ruled or Saturn ruled, this aspect is going to be even stronger for you. So that means if your rising sign is Capricorn, Aquarius, Aries, or Scorpio, this will be stronger for you. If your rising sign is Capricorn or Aquarius, that means you are Saturn in the equation. And Mars is squaring you. So, there's going to be more aggression towards you or more fighting at you. If you are an Aries or Scorpio rising, that means Saturn is squaring you, which means the slowing down aspect is going to feel like it's happening to you more often. So let's recap the main things that Saturn Mars does to a person. It means you're going to experience more hardship. You're going to be ready for life to punch you in the face. You're going to have more experiences with having to wait or suffer or work hard for what you want. This gives you the potential to be very capable and to accomplish a lot because you know what discipline means. It's built into your personality. And themes of dominance and control are going to be really strong themes in your life that will probably have challenges to overcome along with them. So let me know if you think I missed anything about Saturn Mars. If there's something you want to add, if you have questions, I love hearing from you. And if I said something that resonated, tell me, because I want to know, you guys. I want to know what I said and how it landed for you. Or even if it doesn't feel quite right for you, I'd love to hear that too. You can also book a private reading with me, and we can talk more about some of the details of not only how this aspect shows up in your life, but when it might be most prevalent based on timing. So click the link in the description if you want to get a one-on-one Zoom call with me going over this or anything else in your chart. Let me know if there is an aspect or a placement in your chart that is challenging that you want me to cover. And the ones that get commented the most will probably be done first. Saturn Mars is no joke. It is one of the most challenging aspects, but if worked with properly, it can be one of the most empowering, and it can make you can do great things with Saturn Mars, but only if you are willing to step up to discipline, only if you are willing to take accountability for your actions, and only if you are willing to do a shitload of hard work. So always remember though, you guys, whenever we're doing videos like this, that you are not your chart. You are what you do with your chart. And I will see you all in the next video.